All right, well, welcome to Tim's Take. Today, we have a special guest is Dr. Robert Pierce, and Bob and I have been, Robert Pierce Jr.
The second.
Yeah. Bob and I have worked together for a dozen years probably, putting agriculture and conservation on the same page.
Yep.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, about using bobwhite quail as our model for habitat. But before we get started, Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Tim, and I appreciate this opportunity. I've been in Missouri since 1989, came up from Arkansas. I was a county extension agent in Arkansas, and fortunately the position opened up here in Missouri with the university, the extension wildlife specialist, and I've been here ever since. I've really enjoyed my time here in the state. A lot of great folks to work with, a lot of partners to help you make your program successful. And just a wonderful experience with the university and MU Extension.
Wonderful.
And I've served as the MU Extension Wildlife and Fisheries, and also do work with aquaculture producers and a variety of work in natural resources.
Great. So when folks have a question, they can always contact you on this.
Absolutely.
And we'll show Bob's contact here in a little bit. But what we're really focusing on today is the habitat for the bobwhite quail.
Right.
And why did we pick the bobwhite quail?
Well, that's a good question. We kind of use bobwhites as a model species, and we know that landowners in Missouri really want to create habitats for wildlife on their property in most cases. Missouri's a private land state, so we really depend on private landowners to create habitats for a variety of species, whether it's bobwhites or for migratory species or just a variety of diversity of species. And bobwhites are one of those in a community of species that require early successional plant communities. And often these are lacking on the agriculture landscape.
What does that mean?
Well, that means that we like to have a lot of annual plants, a lot of native flowering plants, legumes, our native forbs and wildflowers, early successional shrubs, thickets. A lot of times those are not, you don't see them any longer on the landscape. Either they're fields have been enlarged and that cover has been removed, or the thickets have grown up into larger trees. That's fine for some species, but for species like bobwhites that have an early successional type of habitat requirement, succession moves on over time, as you know, with our rainfall patterns. It doesn't take long for a grassy field to become a woodland. Not that long. When you think about maybe 10 or 15 years, you'll see a field change from one habitat component to another. And bobwhites kind of are a species that have trended downward in their population over the number of years because of habitat changes. And we know that a lot of landowners enjoy seeing bobwhites and, of course, hunting them as well.
Yeah, because bobwhites probably peaked out in the 50s and 60s.
Right. We almost had habitats by accident back in those days, just by our farming practices. We had smaller fields. We had a little patchwork of fields and habitats that were just by accident on the landscape. And now you don't see that nearly as often. We've gone to more of a monoculture crop rotation system. It's been profitable for agriculture, but there's been some impacts to some of the wildlife that are indicative, like bobwhites and some other species.
All right. And the bird itself limits some issues too, doesn't it?
They've adapted to certain conditions. They're a very small bird in some respects. They have they're chicken-like. They're a gallinaceous bird, like a chicken. So they spend a lot of time walking on mineral soil. They don't necessarily like to fly unless they're flushed. So they'll walk, and that means they require mineral soil that is not a thatchy, grassy, thick cover. They need what we often see with our native warm seasons, that bunch-like cover where they can walk through and find seeds, because they depend on seeds for most of their foods, or small insects during the summer. And if that habitat isn't accessible, then they just won't be there. It's not usable. And so that's why you need to have that early successional disturbance regime in place, like we see from prescribed fire or from disking or from habitat practices that create that bare ground condition. And when you see that, you see an immediate flush of annual plants responding, as you know, germination of plants that readily come back.
Sure. So overgrown is what we don't want.
We don't want thick, thatchy, turf-like grasses. And we see that predominantly in tall fescue. That's just a condition that is inherent with that plant. It's a turf grass, great for cattle.
And soil erosion.
Yes, great for soil erosion. But again, it comes at a price.
Right.
And that's a deterioration of habitat for species like bobwhites.
And I've heard you say that you should be able to look down and see bare ground.
You should, absolutely. At least for some of their life history, you need to have cover that is good nesting habitat, bunch grasses that create nesting cover, but then also have the accessibility that those young chicks can get out and find and forage for small insects and small grains, small seeds. And you're right, they need bare ground.
So right now, we are in late winter, mid to late winter.
Yep.
And the most critical time is now and also coming up, right?
Well, I would say so. January and February are tough times for a lot of species. The foods that wildlife may have had during the summer and fall of the previous year are either deteriorated or they're just not there any longer. Snowfall and some of the ice conditions we have aren't ever very helpful.
Right.
And so a lot of times that cover type, if it wasn't there in the summer or fall, it certainly isn't going to be there now for protection and the escape cover that bobwhites need, for instance. Those thickets, those shrubs, that heavy woody cover that bobwhites really require for some of the escape from weather conditions. You're right. This time of year certainly becomes limiting for some food and cover requirements.
And also we want it at different levels because of the snow and ice.
Right. Yes. The birds have to be, particularly for bobwhites, the thermal protection that cover type provides is very critical. It can be in a not necessarily woody cover, but also some of the native grasses that provide that type of heavy cover that birds can utilize.
Okay. Now, you mentioned insects and as well as seeds and what have you. But there is that time, what about March, you said, that can get really bad because...
It can get really tough. Typically, a population of bobwhites that have entered the fall, they're in coveys, and they kind of have adapted that way to survive as a group because they can forage together. The thermal protection that they have in a roost during the wintertime is a covey. But then, of course... predation is a factor, weather conditions, and so just in a natural situation, we're lucky to have 20% of those birds in the fall population survive into the winter.
Only 1 in 5 survive?
Only about 1 in 5. Maybe it depends on the conditions, but maybe 1 in 4.
Wow.
So again, because of their high death rate, naturally, they can rebound fairly quickly with good habitat because they have a very high reproductive rate.
Okay.
Which is good. They have a large number of eggs in the clutch during that first nesting time. And with good cover and good habitat, those birds can, those chicks can survive and make it into the fall. And so the whole situation goes on again. You have the whole different types of the year. And,
so they've kind of adapted to this boom or bust.
Yes, they have. They have in many ways. And, of course, habitat's the key because if you do have good habitat conditions where the birds can find good nesting cover early on in April, May, they're more likely to have a successful nest. And those birds that are hatched, the clutch that hatches will hopefully, again, have better conditions to have most of that clutch survive. Now,
Sure.
Again, they have issues as well because, again, they're food for a lot of things.
Right, and we'll get to that in a little bit, yeah.
They're part of the food chain in which they have many, there's a lot of things can happen.
So that's a good point. So if we try to benefit the bottom of the food chain like bobwhite quail are,
Right.
the rest will improve also.
Well, that's true. They're part of the whole food chain and food web for They have a role to play ecologically. They've adapted to eating insects and seeds and responding to that disturbance regime that we've talked about. But then other species as well rely on them as a food source. And whether it's raptors that may attack birds, or whether it's snakes, black rat snakes eating the eggs of a nest, or whether it's raccoons or possums or skunks, foxes, just the whole gamut of predators that naturally occur, that just part of the natural world.
Yes, it is. But before we get too far off,
to
where we are now, so there's really not much I could do right now to help out what's there.
Well, I mean, you can make plans, and I think planning is a key. So often we make decisions that we wish we'd made last year, and if we plan ahead, we can certainly do some things. We can create good conditions for the birds later during the year, for instance. We can refrain from mowing.
So I shouldn't mow anything now.
No, you have cover out there. Don't mow it now, and reduce that cover that might be there and might be useful.
But even like through March, probably just kind of refrain from that.
Well, I would. I mean, if your goals are to have some wildlife survive and have access to some cover,
because I just had a colleague mention today. He said, things looking kind of ratty, kind of unkempt. Maybe I can start mowing. Ground's frozen, but that's not good.
Not necessarily, and that's one of the key negative impacts to wildlife or people. The recreational mowing aspect. Just wanting to keep things clean and neat. That's okay. And there's some benefit to that, obviously, but for bobwhites, you're reducing that cover, and for other species, you're eliminating a very important habitat component that they might need.
Now, once April gets here, insects coming in, we're not quite so under the gun, are we?
No, I think the changes, we have warmer weather, the birds are adapting to conditions. They're breaking the coveys up naturally. The males are going out, and you'll hear that whistle. Attracting a female, and they're looking for a mate. And the birds are very adaptable and can find, if there's some cover there, they'll use it and hopefully begin to nest. And
okay, so this spring, what we can do is start developing our land.
Well, and just think of what might be limiting. If you understand the habitat needs of a species and understand their ecology, you'll be most successful in identifying the habitat component that's in short supply. So many times you'll have a pasture that is right adjacent to a mature woodland. And those provide habitats for some species. But for bobwhites, they really require a transitional area that provides some shrubby cover in that transition area where you have opportunities to do some habitat management along that edge.
Okay.
And so if you can take a look at your property, get a map out and identify the fields and what your objectives are, and then see where you might be able to integrate other practices along with those objectives. And oftentimes you can make those trade-offs.
Okay.
And maybe not produce crops right adjacent to a woody border, but have some habitats, some native habitats in a field border that would allow food and cover to exist around the crop field.
Right. So we have found out, we got the numbers to show it, that that 30-foot by a wooded fence row you lose money on that.
Well, you certainly can, and of course it depends again on the crop prices, but we've shown where yield is very much impacted around those rows adjacent to mature timber. And, back a few years ago, we looked at incorporating field edges and field borders out at the Bradford Research Center in that era where we were doing some things. And we really demonstrated the benefit of those woody field, or those native field borders for the birds. And I think we showed data where we really increased the number of coveys on that landscape really tremendously.
Yes, by 10 times, actually.
Yes, and we just demonstrated the fact that by creating habitat, you can make a big difference.
Right. And these, this 30-foot area, that can be shrubs, like you mentioned, and mixed with native forbs and some grasses.
Right.
And that gives them that transition zone.
Yes, and it also provides that food and cover that we take for granted, but it's so important for bobwhites.
Right.
Number of programs out there that the Department of Conservation and USDA NRCS promotes to offer cost share opportunities for landowners to adopt these practices.
Okay.
And so there's excellent resources available, technical assistance, as well as cost share dollars for qualifying practices.
And that's with Missouri Department of Conservation and the NRCS.
Yes, both.
You both have practices. That's fantastic. Now, so is it one of these things that, all right, I'll order my seed, overseed it, I'll get my bushes, I'll plant it, and I'm done?
Well, no, not at all. I mean,
I'm not.
No, you're not just done. I think if you have a passion for managing habitats on your property, you're going to want to keep improving, and there's management that's involved. As we talked about a little earlier, plant succession can keep on going.
Right.
And you got to maintain those areas in the successional stage that you're interested in keeping for nesting or brood rearing or other types of habitat. And again, these practices can be integrated right along with your normal agricultural objective, whether you're in cattle production or whether you're a row crop producer, a woodland owner. All offer opportunities for creating habitat for species like bobwhites.
And we need this. We need for nesting and brood raising.
Right. As the covey, as the birds nest, the male or female is on the clutch. When those eggs hatch all at the same time, they're fully feathered. Those young chicks are quickly off the nest.
Okay.
And they're
on their own?
No, the female or male will brood them and stay with them for a period of time, teaching them what to eat and kind of, as chickens do, you kind of know how chickens operate.
Right.
If you remember. But no, they'll require a whole set of different conditions in their habitat to find insects and seeds. And typically it's your recently disturbed area where you have a lot of legumes, partridge pea, desmodiums, those stick tights that you see and get on your legs when you're walking through.
But that's great quail food.
Great quail habitat, absolutely. Great. And so the types of practices that create those conditions are often through disturbances like prescribed fire.
Okay.
And so fire is a tool that is so important to implement in certain areas if you can on your property. And there's many opportunities for assistance, again, from MDC or from NRCS to help develop burn plans so you'll be successful.
So just as a general rule, though, burning in the spring, I say March, will favor more thicker grass, correct?
Yes.
Whereas burning in the fall, let's say October, November.
Or even in late summer.
Okay. So we can burn in late summer?
Well, in certain conditions.
If you had probably the native grasses.
If you have the native, right. They favor more of the forb component.
Okay.
So fire used at the correct time can kind of favor different types of conditions.
One or the other. Now, could you knock the tall fescue back to get forbs established with fire?
You might be able to, maybe even some herbicide use to begin to renovate the tall fescue and give those natives a chance to establish.
Break that clumps up a bit.
Yes.
Of course, we're very conscientious about soil erosion and tillage.
Oh, sure.
But a light disking can go a long ways, too, in maintaining our habitat.
Yes, and particularly, disking is another way to break up the sod, break up the thick conditions, and even disking in strips. You don't have to disc a whole field.
Okay.
Possibly disc an area adjacent to a woodland, and do it in areas that are not erodible if you can, and then maybe alternate those disc strips over a 3 or 4 year time period.
Okay.
So in other words, you're creating conditions that are diverse. You might have a disc strip 1 year, and then move over 30 feet or so and disc that strip the next year.
Okay.
And so you're creating, again, a rotational type of habitat.
And is there a good or bad time to do that?
Well, typically, disking is done during the fall and winter.
Okay.
Good time. That's
But wouldn't I be destroying some habitat?
well, no, not if it's thick thatch.
Okay,
which
okay.
isn't habitat to begin with.
Sure. So that's what we could do right now is evaluating what we have.
Yes.
And if we have thick thatch, we could do some like disking. We could do some burning,
Yes, indeed.
for example. We can make the plans for some more shrub planting. Now, we have this and that you provided. It looks good to me. I mean, we've got a area in there. So, but what's wrong with this?
Well, that's a good question. What is wrong with that? Well, for instance, you don't have a very good cover for birds to nest, and you've kind of mowed that edge, and you've created open conditions that just aren't very useful for birds. Predators would find them there. They're not going to be in that strip, for instance, and they're certainly not going to have areas to nest in that condition, and so
they'll make sure. So we need that edge feathering. We need that.
Yes.
We need not just some abrupt.
not abrupt, but that feathering, that transition, which from one plant community to the other.
Okay.
And again, that's how Bob Whites have adapted, kind of evolved, if you will, to really require disturbance regimes at a frequency that can maintain early successional habitat, and then also a diversity of habitat. So never one thing, a diverse conditions, that patchwork of habitat.
Right. Okay. All right. So, Bob, let's start from the very beginning as far as year-round habitat. So, what are we going to start off with?
Well, you know, we have to start out and think about the species, and let's talk about Bob White quail year-round.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about the habitat they need at that time.
All righty.
Well, let's go on to about March.
Okay.
Where we talked where March is that critical time, and then of course we have springtime, and the coveys that have survived the year. Of course, they're reduced in number more than likely, but they'll break up, and they'll begin then to, the males will begin to search for female, and the summer call that you'll hear.
That Bob White. That's
call.
the males doing that.
That's the male doing that. And that call will occur throughout the summer as they look for hens. But once they do mate, the hen will begin to establish a nest. That typically takes a few days, and then they'll begin to lay their eggs in the clutch, about 14 or 15, let's say, on average, give or take. And that egg laying is one a day. And then they have about a 23-day period of time that they're on the clutch.
Okay.
And then once those eggs hatch, after that, that's about a 40-day time period that bird is on the nest or nest building or what have you. So that's quite a lengthy time.
Yes.
And that's why it's so critical that birds have an opportunity to find that type of cover to have a successful nest.
And that's what, May, June, that first big nesting?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
They typically hatch June 15th is one of the kind of a time period that nest will hatch. But that means they have mated and built the nest in late April, early May, when you go back, let's say, 40-some days.
And what are they looking for to build that nest?
They're looking for the type of clump grass, native warm season grasses, for instance, or broom sedge or other types of clumpy structure. It has to be the right structure that allows them to have a nest on the ground, but that cover has to have been there last year.
Okay.
You know, it's not going to be there just right now. If it's not there, it's not there. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
so you have to think about that management from last year to have that habitat for the spring.
Because I've seen the nest just right up against a clump.
Oh, yeah, right there.
And it's amazing to see.
It is. And that they're not necessarily looking for they're not looking for native grasses. They don't know what a native grass
Right.
is. They're just looking for the right structure. And that structure typically is from a native grass,
Sure.
like switchgrass or little blue stem or big blue stem. But it'd be fescue as well. They're not that, again, they're just wanting the right structure.
Okay. All right.
But, you know, it'll typically be in situations that have natives
Okay.
that allow that clumpiness to be
So
there.
so it's good to have that. Then also some brood rearing.
Well, once
with-
those eggs hatch, as we discussed, that brood, the chicks leave that nest along with the hen, and they're looking for food. And that's typically in bare ground conditions that have the right type of cover overhead that allows that bird to navigate on the ground again. Again, they're walking.
Right.
And then locating food sources, small insects,
Spiders.
spiders,
Yes.
little bugs, beetles, and the protein they need is critical at that time. And of course, having overhead cover, keeping them protected from the sun, as well as from predators.
Right.
Is
So
a
they
key.
can't see them.
Well, then as the birds survive and grow, by August, they pretty much resemble the adults.
Wow, it's pretty
And
quick.
It is pretty quick. And they'll begin to have different behavior and over time develop into a covey.
Okay.
The birds will scatter around. They're not necessarily affinity. There's no affinity. They'll find other birds
Okay.
to develop into a covey. Later in the summer, early fall.
But they'll nest again sometimes.
Well, that's the interesting part of it. We've learned from research in Missouri that birds will re-nest in August, and that's one of the
even
good,
successful in June, they'll do it again in August.
Yes, oftentimes they will, and there's no prediction. I mean, it just occurs, and that's a good thing because that allows for a higher population potential to be into the fall population. And again, that's why oftentimes you'll see young broods in late August or early September.
And it's not a bad time because that's abundance of seeds and insects are coming in about that time.
A very good abundance of different foods. The second clutch is usually smaller
Okay.
than the first one, and that's why that first nesting attempt is so critical to be successful, because the second clutch may or may not happen. You just never know.
Because sometimes we've had very wet springs,
Yeah.
and I've heard you say that we lost a lot of nesting.
Yes, you're exactly right. Heavy rains, flooding conditions, cool temperatures that really cause problems if that happens in June.
Okay. So they can re-nest then in July. They just won't have that second one. They'll just have one successful one.
And again, it's really a phenomenon that back in the days of the 50s and 60s, biologists only thought birds would nest once. We didn't have that knowledge of the second attempt until fairly recently.
Oh, really? Because we just probably thought they were just continuing trying to get that first one.
That's right. Oh, and so as we develop techniques to follow birds, telemetry types of studies, and other research, we've learned that the birds had a real higher potential for reproduction than we once thought, and so that's good.
Yes. I've even heard that they can increase their numbers by 50% each year. So if you have a covey, they can get into more fairly quickly.
Yes, they can. Of course, you have to remember the high mortality rate, but at least if you have a higher population, you have a higher chance to maintain a higher number of birds over time. With that, you're still going to have a high mortality just because that's the nature of the...
Right. They're the bottom of the food chain.
They're part of the food chain. However, habitat's the key to have as many opportunities for that bird to be successful, whether they're nesting or brood rearing or getting into the wintertime and they require those covey headquarters.
Okay.
Shrubby thickets, they require a little heavier habitat condition, that shrubby component for protection and escape cover.
And this is a good quail habitat right here, where you have
It
those
is
three.
a lot of diversity there. You have, of course, your production goals, your row crops. You have your field edges though that are there. You have a lot of diversity, and it's important that that's there, but also distributed across a larger area if you can, so you have that type of habitat over a larger area.
'Cause we don't want little islands.
That's true. The island effect can certainly, it might harbor a covey possibly, but it's not going to have a population of birds that's going to expand.
How far between? Well, let's talk about covey headquarters first. So, what is a covey headquarters?
Well, a covey headquarters is nothing more than a clump of shrubs.
Okay.
It might be an area around 15 feet by 30 feet or 15 by 15. It doesn't have to be a real large area. They're just clumps of like blackberries or sumac or other native shrubs.
Wild cherry, I think, is one of them.
False indigo.
Yes.
Some of the little shrubby, the wild plum.
Okay.
It's the stuff you hate to walk through. If you have property and you've got a plum thicket, you know you're not walking through it.
Right.
But the birds use it.
And Missouri Department of Conservation will sell you
Oh, absolutely.
these
They have
species.
at their nursery down in Licking, Missouri, they have a quail cover bundle. And so if you want to establish shrubs from that, you can, or else you can have your own. Oftentimes that will be on your property. Maybe you just go out and look for them.
And those can get established in just a few years, really.
Oh, yes.
To where they're starting to be useful.
Yes.
Now, are they then planted? I'm done with it, or you still have to manage it a little
Well,
bit?
over time you have to manage those.
Okay.
And we used to think that during the wintertime, quail don't stray far away from woody cover, maybe 50 to 100 feet.
Oh, wow.
They kind of have their little home range, if you will, or their daily routine. They don't really stray too far. And again, research from here in Missouri has documented that as well. So that covey headquarters, that patchwork of cover is so important, along with food, nearby food sources.
Now, and this is just not good for the bobwhite quail. Other ground nesting birds benefit from this.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many species that benefit, like cottontail rabbits, or your
Mourning doves,
your songbirds. Many of your birds, like brown thrashers or cardinals, or even some of the songbirds that migrate through, require that dense thicket for nesting and being successful.
So by doing this for the bobwhite quail, we're also getting
A lot of diverse.
yes, a lot of other small game.
Right,
wildlife.
and what we're also doing in some respects is creating the habitats that can support pollinators.
Oh, sure.
Lots of insects, beneficial insects, but also pollinators and other valuable species in the food chain.
Yeah, because that's a win-win, because the native forbs bloom, the pollinators come for that, but they produce seed for the bobwhite quail.
That's right, and that's really the key.
Yeah, it's a very diverse habitat, but it all works together.
Right, it does, and it can be accomplished very effectively, but you have to plan for it. Again, take some time, and January, February are good months to take stock of your property, get out and evaluate your conditions, just observe some of the limiting factors that you might need to have, like we've talked about, the habitat components, and work with your Department of Conservation private lands conservationists.
Sure.
They're a very valuable resource, technical assistance, and they can help you develop a plan.
Yes.
And that's a key to success.
And I think one of the things you've mentioned too is mowing is not advisable unless it's a plan for.
Right, exactly. I mean, oftentimes you may have to mow certain patches of habitat to maintain its successional stage, bush hog here and there. But overall, just mowing the whole property, for instance, doesn't necessarily
the golf
accomplish.
course mentality doesn't go.
That's right. That's
And
right.
if you look at our University of Missouri golf course, there's a lot of natives on it.
Well, they do an excellent job of prescribed burning and creating savanna habitats that are adjacent to the fairways. And also they have a lot of natives that they've managed for and
So
done
that's
a really nice job.
so that's probably one of the examples where you can have the beautiful
Yeah.
your golf course as well as your habitat
There you go.
all working together.
That's true.
That's fantastic. So right now we can also start planning on getting our seeds. Probably it's getting toward the end of planting our native seeds now, but we could do that next
Right.
winter
That's right.
in some of these areas. So now we're rolling into next fall. We've made it through the summer. What can we be doing next fall?
Well, I guess that's dependent on what you have or what you may not have. Hopefully you're going to have some shrubs established. You're going to have some habitats that are going to be available for birds. I think the shrubby thickets are the key.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably one of the most limiting factors on most farms, that lack of escape cover.
Okay.
And so really take stock of the plant conditions, the successional stages of your woodlands. Maybe do some edge feathering now so you'll have that type of cover for the fall.
You mean like some down in some trees
Yes.
or such?
Do some down tree structure or some hinge cutting or maybe some areas along your woodland that borders with a field. Take some of the unmerchantable trees out and just make brush piles. And there's ways to do it so that you're going to be more successful. But, some of the edge feathering, we have some MU guides that talk about that and have some pictures of what that looks like. So I think now would be the time to manage for your fall habitat.
Okay.
For instance, that's just one example.
So talk about habitat then, but you have an appraisal guide that you can do this on.
Well, the Missouri Habitat Appraisal Guide is available on our website, Wildlife Ecology and Management website, and it's just a planning tool to help you identify limiting factors on your property, gives you a kind of an evaluation step-by-step process to do so, and again, unless you plan, you're not going to be successful.
Right.
And so this is just a way to help plan some management activities that can help you be successful.
Okay. And when people say, I've done this, I still don't have bobwhite quail, are they probably missing that one
Well,
component?
there may be something missing that they're not observing.
Okay.
And again, birds will often find usable habitat, but it may take some time.
Sure. And also getting your neighbors involved is good too.
Well, that's a critical piece. Bobwhites typically have a home range of, let's say, 40 acres.
Okay.
40 to 50 acres, maybe smaller if the habitat is good. But if you only own 10 acres, you're not going to really be able to have much of an effect unless you might have a habitat that your neighbor doesn't have.
Right.
Or, for instance, you work together to create those types of conditions. So you're right. You need to work with neighbors when you can and help them learn about quail.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the point is also, not only does it help quail, it helps a lot of other species.
That's exactly right. Even species like white-tailed deer and wild turkey require some of the habitat components that we're talking about. And so and again, many of our songbirds and other species.
And folks are getting a lot of interest in different types of butterflies and bumblebees. This all goes in together with that too.
All goes together, absolutely.
Because I think they've all evolved together.
Yes, they have. And they've adapted to that disturbance regime that creates those annual flowering plants that and perennials, some of the perennials.
Great.
So again, you're right, it's all there together.
It's all tied. And we also have a nice video that you all did here several years ago.
Well, DVDs are kind of outdated now.
Right.
But again, we have a supply, and if anyone would like one, I think you'll have a supply that you can get. Them.
Just email me, and we can get it sent to you. And this was made in conjunction with MU Extension, MDC, and NRCS.
Yes.
So that's fantastic.
And again, we're using bobwhite quail as our model today. Whether you're interested in bobwhites or white-tailed deer, turkeys, gray squirrels, what have you, you need to take some of the same steps. Learn about their life history, their ecology, and learn about their habitat needs, and you can certainly be successful.
If I don't want deer because they eat my garden,
Right.
can I do things then to defer from that?
Well, yeah, you certainly can. There's some things you can do, and we have some ideas within our deer damage prevention guide.
Oh, wonderful.
To talk about that. But
all right.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob. Anything else you want to conclude with?
No, I think we have additional resources that are available that you can access through MU Extension, or certainly the Department of Conservation has a lot of resources to.
Wonderful.
To use as well.
And be looking in the next coming months also for interviews with Bob out in the field that you can see some of this.
Yes, we'll plan on doing this again.
All right. Thanks so much, Bob.
Yeah, thank you.